The cold had stopped hurting an hour ago. That was when Bryony Cresswell knew she was dying. She stumbled through the snow, her thin evening slippers soaked through, her ball gown heavy with ice. The wind cut through her cloak like it wasn't there at all, and somewhere behind her, miles behind her now, Lord Hadrian Vance was probably still searching. Let him search. Let him send every man in his household into the frozen countryside. She would rather die in this God-forsaken wilderness than become his wife. Her foot caught on a hidden root. She fell hard, the impact jarring through her frozen bones, and for a moment she simply lay there, face pressed into the snow, wondering if this was where it ended. 23 years of life, and it would finish in a ditch on the road to nowhere, because she'd been foolish enough to think she could escape. Get up, she told herself. Get up, get up, get up. But her body wouldn't obey. The cold had seeped too deep, had stolen something vital from her limbs. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, each pulse weaker than the last. The sound of hooves came from somewhere distant. Or perhaps not so distant. She couldn't tell anymore. Everything had gone soft and strange, the world narrowing to the white of the snow and the black of the sky, and the terrible, peaceful certainty that she was about to die. The hooves stopped, a voice, deep and sharp, cutting through the wind. What the devil? Footsteps crunched through the snow. Hands gripped her shoulders, turning her over, and she found herself staring up at a face she knew, a face that made her heart stutter for entirely different reasons than the cold. Dacian Ravenswood, Duke of Blackmore, the most feared man in 3 counties. She'd seen him before, of course, at balls and dinners and country gatherings, always standing apart, always watching with those pale gray eyes that seemed to see straight through people. Her brother Peregrine had been at Cambridge with him, had called him friend once, though that friendship had cooled over the years. The rumors said he'd killed his first wife. The rumors said he kept her portrait in his study and spoke to it at night. The rumors said a dozen different things, each more terrible than the last. And now he was kneeling over her in the snow, his black greatcoat billowing in the wind, his face carved from ice and shadows. Miss Cresswell. His voice was flat, not surprised, not concerned, just flat. What are you doing here? She tried to speak, but her lips wouldn't form words. Her teeth were chattering so violently she thought they might shatter. He didn't wait for an answer. He stripped off his greatcoat and wrapped it around her in one efficient motion, then lifted her from the ground as if she weighed nothing at all. She should have protested, should have demanded he put her down, should have insisted she could walk on her own, should have done anything other than lie limp in his arms like a half-dead rabbit. But the warmth of his coat was seeping into her frozen skin, and his chest was solid and steady against her cheek, and she was so tired, so impossibly tired. Stay awake. His voice was hard. An order, not a request. Do you hear me, Miss Cresswell? You will not fall asleep. I'm not, she managed through numb lips. I'm simply resting my eyes. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had any warmth in it. Rest your eyes when you're not dying of exposure. He carried her to his horse, a massive black beast that stamped impatiently in the snow. She didn't know how he mounted with her still in his arms, but suddenly they were moving, the horse's gait smooth and fast, and Blackmore's arms were iron bands around her. Where? She started. Thornhaven, my hunting lodge. He cut her off before she could finish. It's close. Closer than anywhere else. I can't. You can't. My reputation. That sound again. That humorless, almost laugh. Your reputation will survive a night in my lodge far better than your body will survive another hour in this cold. She wanted to argue. She should argue. But she couldn't feel her fingers anymore, couldn't feel her toes, and couldn't feel anything except the drum of his heartbeat, against her ear, and the terrifying warmth that was slowly returning to her limbs. The pain came with it. Fire in her extremities, as blood forced its way back into frozen capillaries. She gasped, and his arms tightened fractionally around her. "The pain is good," he said. "It means you're not dead yet." How comforting. I'm not in the business of comfort, Miss Cresswell. No, she thought. He was in the business of intimidation, of coldness, of making women disappear. At least according to the rumors. But the rumors hadn't mentioned that he would stop on a frozen road in the middle of the night to rescue a woman he barely knew. Hadn't mentioned that he would wrap her in his own coat while the wind cut through his shirt. Hadn't mentioned that his hands, when they adjusted her against his chest, would be surprisingly gentle. The lodge appeared through the trees, a dark shape against the darker sky. Lights glowed in the windows, and within moments, they were inside. Warmth everywhere, overwhelming after the brutal cold. Servants appeared, a housekeeper with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, barking orders. A fire stoked to roaring. Blankets, hot water, brandy pressed to her lips. Through it all, Blackmore stood apart, watching with those pale eyes, his expression unreadable. "She'll need dry clothes," the housekeeper said. "I'll find something." "Do it quickly," Blackmore's voice was clipped. "And send word to the village. I want a doctor here by morning." "In this storm, Your Grace?" "Did I stutter, Mrs. Holt?" The housekeeper vanished. Bryony found herself alone with him, wrapped in blankets by the fire, her ruined gown dripping onto the expensive carpet. "You should go," she said. Her voice was stronger now, though still shaking. "This is improper." "Many things are improper, Miss Cresswell. Dying on my doorstep would have been far more so." He moved closer, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. He was tall. She'd forgotten how tall. "Now, are you going to tell me why I found you half frozen on a road 10 miles from the nearest house, wearing a ball gown and no proper coat? Or shall I guess? I was taking a walk." "A walk?" The evening air was refreshing. His jaw clenched. "You were at Lord Vance's house tonight. The engagement ball." She flinched. She couldn't help it. And she saw him notice, saw something shift in those cold gray eyes. "There was no engagement," she said softly. "There was never going to be an engagement. And yet you ran. In the middle of the night. In a snowstorm." He crouched before her, bringing them eye to eye, and she was suddenly very aware of how close he was. Of the sharp planes of his face, the thin scar that ran along his jaw, the faint scent of smoke and winter pine. "What did he do to you?" The question was soft, dangerous. She should lie, should make up some story about a misunderstanding, a lover's quarrel, anything other than the truth. But she was so tired, and he was looking at her with something that almost resembled concern. And before she could stop herself, the words spilled out. "He told me that he owned me, that my father's debts made me his property, and if I didn't agree to the engagement willingly, he would." She stopped, her throat closing. "He would what?" She couldn't say it, couldn't form the words for what Lord Hadrian Vance had promised to do to her if she refused him. The way his hand had gripped her arm, bruising. The way his breath had been hot against her ear as he detailed exactly how he would break her. She didn't have to say it. Something dark settled over Blackmore's features. Something that made him look, for just a moment, like the monster the rumors claimed he was. "I see," he said, his voice dropping. "I can't go back. I won't. I'll die first." "You very nearly did." He rose, turning away from her, and his voice was ice. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow, when the storm breaks, we'll determine what's to be done." "Your Grace, I can't possibly." "You can, and you will." He stopped at the door, not looking back. "Lord Vance will come looking for you. When he does, he'll learn that you are under my protection, and he will discover exactly what that means." The door closed behind him. Bryony sat in the firelight, trembling, and wondered if she'd escaped one monster only to find herself in the lair of another. The storm did not break by morning. Bryony woke to howling wind and windows so thick with frost she couldn't see through them. The fire had burned low during the night, and she lay for a long moment in the unfamiliar bed, trying to remember where she was. Thornhaven, the Duke of Blackmore's hunting lodge, the last place on earth she should be. She'd been given a room that was far too fine for a hunting lodge, with velvet curtains and a massive four-poster bed. Mrs. Holt had found her a nightgown, plain but clean, and had clucked over her ruined ball gown with the particular disapproval of a woman who understood exactly what that dress represented. The dress she'd been wearing when she fled. The dress Lord Vance had chosen for her. Bryony pushed herself upright, wincing at the ache in her muscles. The cold had done damage, even if she'd survived it. Her joints protested every movement, and her fingers were still clumsy with the lingering effects of the exposure. A knock at the door. "Miss Cresswell, are you awake?" Mrs. Holt entered without waiting for an answer, carrying a tray of tea and toast. Behind her came a young maid with an armful of clothes. "His Grace has sent these," the housekeeper said crisply. "They belonged to his late mother. He thought they might fit." His late mother, not his late wife, the one he'd allegedly murdered. His mother. Bryony examined the clothes. A simple day dress in deep green wool, well made, but several years out of fashion. Warm stockings, a proper corset, everything she needed to be presentable. "The storm," she said, as Mrs. Holt poured the tea. "How long will it last?" "Days, perhaps. The roads are impassable, even if they weren't." The housekeeper hesitated. "His Grace has given orders that you're not to leave." "Not to leave?" "For your safety, miss. The cold last night, and the doctor hasn't arrived yet to examine you." "I feel perfectly well." "His Grace disagrees." Of course he did, because the Duke of Blackmore was accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. Because he'd decided she was under his protection, and apparently that meant she had no say in the matter. She dressed quickly, grateful for the warmth of the wool, and made her way downstairs. The lodge was larger than she'd expected, a sprawling stone structure that must have been centuries old, filled with dark wood and trophy heads. She found him in the study, standing by the window, with a glass of something amber in his hand. It wasn't yet noon. "Miss Cresswell." He didn't turn. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough." She moved into the room. "Your housekeeper says the storm will last for days." "It will. And that I'm not permitted to leave." Now he turned, and those gray eyes swept over her with an assessment that made her skin prickle. "Would you prefer I send you back out into the cold? I'm sure Lord Vance would be delighted to receive you." The name hit like a blow. "That's not fair." "Life rarely is." He took a slow sip of his drink. "You're safe here, Miss Cresswell. That should be enough for you." "Safe." She laughed, the sound brittle. "You'll forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. We both know what people say about you." Something passed through his expression. Amusement, perhaps, or something darker. "And what do people say about me?" She should stop. Should remember that she was alone with this man in his isolated lodge, miles from anyone who might help her. But the fear and exhaustion of the past day had burned away her caution, leaving only a reckless sort of honesty. "They say you killed your wife. They say you drove her mad and then pushed her from a window. They say you keep her portrait in your study and talk to it at night, and that her ghost walks the halls of Blackmore Castle, crying for vengeance." He was silent for a long moment. Then, in a low voice, "Do you believe any of that?" "I don't know what to believe." Fair enough. He set down his glass and moved toward her, and she forced herself not to step back. "Let me tell you what I know, Miss Cresswell. I know that you fled Lord Vance's house last night in terror. I know that he's been circling your family for months, waiting for your father's debts to become insurmountable. I know that he's already sent men to search for you, and that by tomorrow, everyone in 3 counties will know you spent the night in my lodge." Her stomach dropped. "Then I have to leave." "And go where?" His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it somehow worse. "Back to Vance? Back to a brother who can't protect you, and an estate that's mortgaged to the roof? You have no money, Miss Cresswell. No options. No allies. I have my pride. Pride won't keep you warm at night. Pride won't stop Vance from claiming what he believes is his." He stopped before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back. "I'm offering you something else. Protection. Real protection. With teeth." "Why?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "Why what? Why would you help me? We've barely spoken 10 words to each other in 6 years. Why now?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Your brother was kind to me once, when kindness was in short supply. Consider this repayment of a debt. Peregrine hasn't spoken to you in years. Debts don't expire simply because friendships do." There was something he wasn't saying. She could feel it, a weight beneath his words, but she couldn't grasp what it was. And before she could press further, a commotion erupted at the front of the house. Voices raised, the sound of a door slamming. Blackmore's expression hardened. "Stay here." "What is it?" "Stay here." He was already moving, striding out of the study with a predator's grace. Bryony waited exactly 3 seconds before following him. In the entrance hall, snow swirled through the open door. A man stood on the threshold, flanked by 2 others, all of them coated in white. And even before she saw his face, she knew from the way her blood went cold. Lord Hadrian Vance had found her. He was handsome in a polished, practiced way. Golden hair, blue eyes, the kind of smile that charmed mothers and deceived daughters. He'd worn that smile when he first called on her family, when he offered to help with her father's debts, when he proposed a solution that would benefit everyone. He wasn't smiling now. "Blackmore." His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were poison. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The silence that followed was absolute. Bryony stood frozen on the stairs, her hand gripping the banister so hard her knuckles went white. She should run, should hide, should do anything other than stand here watching Lord Vance smile his terrible smile at the man who'd saved her life. But she couldn't move. "Something that belongs to you." Blackmore's voice was ice, and he positioned himself between Vance and the stairs without seeming to move at all. "I wasn't aware you dealt in human property, Vance. Miss Cresswell and I have an understanding. Her father and I came to an arrangement before his death. Surely you know how these things work. I know how coercion works. I know how desperation works." Blackmore took a step forward, and something in his posture made Vance's companions shift nervously. "What I don't know is why you think you're entitled to enter my home and make demands. She's my betrothed. She's my guest." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of a thunderclap. "And guests under my roof are under my protection. Perhaps you've heard what that means." Vance's smile flickered. Then it was back, smooth and practiced. "Blackmore, be reasonable. The girl is confused, overwrought. She fled in a moment of feminine hysteria. I'm sure once she's had time to calm down. She seems perfectly calm to me." Blackmore didn't look back at her, but somehow she knew he was aware of exactly where she stood. Certainly calmer than she was last night, half frozen on a road because she'd rather die than return to your house. The words hung in the cold air. Vance's expression darkened. the charm slipping to reveal something uglier beneath. "You don't know what you're interfering with," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "The girl owes me. Her family owes me. I have documents, debts, legal claims that—" "Legal claims," Blackmore laughed, and the sound was like broken glass. "By all means, pursue your legal claims. Take them to the magistrate. Explain to him how the woman you claim as your betrothed fled your home in terror, in the middle of a snowstorm, wearing nothing but a ball gown. Explain the bruises on her arms. I'm sure he'll be fascinated." Bryony's hand went instinctively to her forearm, where Vance's grip had left marks. Vance's eyes followed the movement. His mask cracked completely, and for just a moment, she saw the monster beneath. The same monster who had cornered her in his study last night, who had told her in explicit detail what he would do to her once they were married. "This isn't over," he said, barely above a whisper. "No." Blackmore took another step forward, and now there was something almost eager in his posture. "It isn't. But the next time you come to my door, Vance, I suggest you bring an army. Because if I ever see you within 10 miles of Miss Cresswell again, I will destroy you. Not legally. Not publicly. I will take you apart piece by piece, and I will enjoy every moment of it." The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then Vance turned and walked out into the storm, his men scrambling after him. The door slammed shut. The wind howled. Blackmore didn't move for a long moment. Then he turned, and his eyes found hers, and she saw something in them that she didn't understand. Something raw and burning, quickly shuddered. "Are you all right?" he asked. She realized she was shaking. I can't." He crossed the hall in 3 strides and caught her elbow as her knees buckled. His touch was careful, almost clinical, but his voice when he spoke was rough. "Breathe, Miss Cresswell. He's gone. He'll come back. Yes. He'll destroy my brother. He said he would. He has debts, documents. He could ruin Peregrine completely. Your brother can take care of himself. You don't understand." She pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. "My father trusted him. When Papa was dying, when the debts were mounting, Vance came to him with a solution. A marriage between our families. Papa thought he was being generous, thought he was saving us. He didn't know." Her voice cracked. "He didn't know what Vance really wanted." Blackmore was silent, watching her with those unreadable gray eyes. "He wants to hurt me," she whispered. "Not just possess me. Hurt me. He told me so last night. He said once we were married, he would teach me my place. He said he would enjoy breaking me." She expected disgust, pity, the awkward discomfort of a man confronted with female vulnerability. What she got instead was fury. Cold, controlled, terrifying fury that transformed Blackmore's face into something she almost didn't recognize. "He touched you. It wasn't a question." "He grabbed my arm, that's all. I ran before he could." She swallowed hard. "I climbed out a window. There was a trellis. I didn't even grab my coat. I just ran. Through a snowstorm, for 10 miles, in evening slippers. I wasn't thinking clearly." "No." His voice softened. "You were thinking very clearly. You were thinking that death was preferable to what he offered." She looked up at him, startled by his understanding. "I know something about choosing death over surrender," he murmured, and for just a moment, something old and wounded crossed his expression. "My wife, Eleanor. The rumors say I killed her." The air seemed to vanish from Bryony's lungs. "The truth is more complicated." He turned away, moving to the window where the storm still raged. She was ill. Had been for years. The kind of illness that lives in the mind, not the body. Some days she was the woman I married, bright and laughing and full of life. Other days, she barely recognized me. And at the end, he stopped. His shoulders were rigid. At the end, she couldn't bear it anymore. The confusion, the fear, the way her own mind had become her enemy. She chose to end it, on her own terms. And I. His voice fractured. I found her. I was too late to stop her, but not too late to hold her while she died. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. The rumors started immediately. Her family blamed me, said I'd driven her to it, and said I'd been cruel or unfaithful. The ton loves a villain, Miss Cresswell. It's much more satisfying to believe a man murdered his wife than to accept that sometimes people simply break. She moved toward him without thinking. Her hand found his arm, and he flinched at the contact, then went very still. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked why I'm helping you. He turned to face her, and his eyes were dark with old pain. Because Vance is the kind of man who breaks things for pleasure. Because when I found you in the snow last night, half dead and still fighting, you reminded me of someone who didn't have the chance to fight back. Your wife? No. His gaze held hers. Myself. Before she could ask what he meant, the sound of hooves echoed outside. A single rider approaching fast. Blackmore's expression shuddered instantly. Stay here, he said. I mean it this time. He strode out before she could respond. Bryony stood alone in the entrance hall, her mind reeling. He'd lost his wife to despair. He'd been blamed for a death he couldn't prevent. And somehow, in his mind, saving her was tied to that old wound. She should be frightened, should be wary of a man with so much darkness in his past. Instead, she found herself wanting to understand. The front door opened. Cold air rushed in, and with it came a voice she knew. Bryony. Bryony. Peregrine. Her brother was here. She rushed forward, and he caught her in a fierce embrace, snow melting off his coat. Thank God, he breathed into her hair. When Vance's men came asking if you'd returned, when I realized you'd been out in that storm all night, I thought I'd lost you. I'm all right. I'm safe. You're in Blackmore's hunting lodge. Peregrine pulled back, his expression complicated. Of all the places you could have ended up. He saved my life, Perry. I know. Her brother looked past her to where Blackmore stood in the doorway. And now, we need to discuss what happens next. Blackmore's expression didn't change. Yes, we do. Because in approximately 6 hours, Lord Vance will have told everyone in 3 counties that your sister spent the night alone with me. And by morning, her reputation will be destroyed beyond repair. Bryony's stomach dropped. She'd known on some level, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Unless, Blackmore continued, his voice carefully flat, we give them a different story entirely. Peregrine's eyes narrowed. What kind of story? The Duke of Blackmore looked at Bryony, and something in his gaze made her pulse quicken. The kind where Miss Cresswell spent the night with me because she is my betrothed, and has been, secretly, for months. The silence that followed Blackmore's declaration was deafening. Bryony stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Betrothed, secretly, for months. The words refused to arrange themselves into anything coherent. Absolutely not. Peregrine's voice was sharp as a blade. You cannot be serious. I'm rarely anything else. Blackmore moved into the hall, closing the door against the howling wind. Think about it, Cresswell. Your sister's reputation is already in tatters. By nightfall, every gossip in the county will know she fled Vance's house and spent the night here. Alone. With me. That wasn't her fault. Fault is irrelevant. Perception is everything. Blackmore's gaze shifted to Bryony. If she's simply a woman who spent the night with the notorious Duke of Blackmore, she's ruined. unmarriageable. Vance can claim she compromised herself deliberately, and society will believe him because society loves to blame women for the circumstances men create. Bryony's hands clenched at her sides. But if she's my secret betrothed, Blackmore continued, the story changes. She wasn't fleeing Vance because she feared him. She was fleeing because she was already promised to another. Her presence here wasn't impropriety. It was a woman seeking shelter with the man she intended to marry. And what happens when this false engagement ends? Peregrine demanded. When you inevitably break things off and she's left with nothing? Who said anything about breaking things off? The words settled between them like stones. Bryony's heart stuttered. You can't mean. She couldn't finish the sentence. I mean exactly what I said. Blackmore's expression was unreadable. A false engagement will only delay the inevitable. Vance won't stop pursuing you simply because you're betrothed to someone else. He'll wait. He'll watch. And the moment the engagement ends, he'll strike. So what are you suggesting? Peregrine's voice was dangerous. That my sister actually marry you? I'm suggesting that it's an option worth considering. An option? Bryony found her voice. You're suggesting I trade one unwanted marriage for another, and I should be grateful for the privilege? Something crossed Blackmore's eyes. I'm suggesting you trade a monster for a man who has no intention of hurting you. The choice, as always, is yours. Some choice. Vance or the man everyone believes murdered his wife. She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth. Blackmore's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. Bryony. Peregrine's voice was a warning. No. Blackmore held up a hand. She's right to be suspicious. I'm offering her protection, not affection. A marriage of convenience, nothing more. She would have her own rooms, her own life, and her own freedom. I would ask nothing of her except the appearance of a union. And in return, Vance loses his claim on her. Your family's debts are settled. And he paused. I stop being the villain in everyone's story. A man who remarries is a man who's moved on. It would silence the rumors more effectively than anything else I've tried. So that was it. He wasn't being noble. He was being practical, using her situation to rehabilitate his own reputation. Somehow, that made it easier to consider. I need time, she said, to think. You have until tonight. Vance won't wait longer than that to start spreading his version of events. Blackmore turned to Peregrine. You should stay. There's a storm coming, worse than last night, and I'd rather not have to rescue another Cresswell from the snow. He strode away before either of them could respond. Peregrine turned to her immediately. You can't seriously be considering this. What choice do I have, Perry? By tonight, I'll be ruined either way. At least this way, I'm ruined on my own terms. Marriage to Blackmore isn't your own terms. It's trading one cage for another. Is it? She looked up at her brother, and for the first time, let him see the fear she'd been hiding. Vance told me what he would do to me once we were married, in detail. He described it like he was planning a hunt, Perry. Like I was prey he intended to run down. Peregrine's face went pale. Why didn't you tell me? What could you have done? You can't pay Father's debts. You can't fight Vance's connections. She reached for his hand, squeezing it. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying that my options were always limited. At least Blackmore is offering me something other than destruction. He's offering you a life with a man you don't know, a man with a dark past. He told me about his wife. The truth, not the rumors. She was ill, Perry, in her mind. She took her own life, and he blamed himself for not being able to save her. Something shifted in Peregrine's expression. He told you that? Yes. Why? She didn't have an answer. I need to speak with him, she said, rising. Alone. She found Blackmore in the study. He stood at the window again, watching the snow. "That was fast," he said without turning. "I expected at least an hour of family debate. I have questions." "I assumed you would." She moved into the room, stopping a careful distance away. "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's about debts or reputation. There are easier ways to silence rumors than marrying a woman you rescued from a snowbank." He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned. "Do you know how long it's been since someone looked at me without fear?" His voice was soft. "Since someone spoke to me like a person instead of a monster? Since anyone dared to tell me to my face that they believed I'd murdered my wife." She flushed. "I shouldn't have." "You should have. It was honest." He took a step toward her. "I've spent 5 years being the villain, Miss Cresswell. 5 years of whispers and accusations. I'm tired of it. And when I saw you in that snow, fighting to live when death would have been so much easier, I thought." He stopped. "You thought what?" "I thought that perhaps I'd finally found someone who understood what it meant to survive something that should have destroyed you." The words struck something deep in her chest. "I'll do it," she heard herself say. "I'll marry you." His eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his composure she'd seen. "You're certain?" "No, but I'd rather be uncertain with you than certain of what awaits me with Vance." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then we have an announcement to make." Dinner that evening was a study in tension. They sat at a table meant for 12. Bryony at one end, Blackmore at the other, Peregrine between them. The food was excellent, but Bryony barely tasted it. In a few hours, everything would change. Blackmore had already sent word to the village, to the local magistrate, to a carefully selected list of society's most prolific gossips. By morning, everyone would know that Miss Bryony Cresswell was engaged to the Duke of Blackmore. That she had been secretly promised to him for months. It was a lie, a carefully constructed fiction designed to save her reputation. But sitting here, watching Blackmore across the candlelit table, she found herself wondering what it would feel like if it were true. "You're not eating." His voice cut through her thoughts. "I'm not hungry." "You should eat anyway. Tomorrow will be difficult." "She's had a trying few days." Peregrine's tone was pointed. "Perhaps some compassion is in order." "Compassion won't help her face what's coming." Blackmore set down his fork. "Vance will contest the engagement. He'll claim it's a fabrication, that I've compromised you and am now trying to cover my tracks. He has allies in society, people who owe him favors or fear his influence." "And you have allies of your own?" "I have something better. I have a reputation." His smile was thin, humorless. "Everyone already believes the worst of me. That makes me unpredictable, dangerous. Vance may have connections, but no one wants to cross a man they believe capable of murder." Bryony shivered. "You're going to use the rumors." "I'm going to use everything at my disposal." He leaned forward, and the candlelight caught the angles of his face. "Vance thinks he's the predator in this scenario. He needs to learn that he was wrong." "And what am I in your scenario?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Something unreadable passed through Blackmore's eyes. "You're the reason," he said, his voice dropping. "For all of it." Before she could ask what he meant, a commotion erupted at the front of the house. Voices raised in alarm, the sound of breaking glass. Blackmore was on his feet instantly. "Stay here. Both of you." He was gone before Peregrine could protest. They waited in tense silence. Bryony's heart hammered against her ribs. Vance. It had to be Vance. But when Blackmore returned, his expression was darker than she'd ever seen it. "What happened?" Peregrine demanded. "Someone threw a rock through the window, with a message attached." He held up a piece of paper, crumpled and stained. It seems Lord Vance has already begun his campaign. Bryony took the paper with trembling hands. The words were scrawled in harsh black ink. The Duke's whore will burn for her sins. God sees what you've done. She read it twice before the meaning sank in. Then her knees buckled. Blackmore caught her before she hit the ground. His arms were strong, steadying, and he lowered her into a chair with surprising gentleness. "Breathe," he said. "It's just words. Words that threaten to burn me alive. Words written by a coward who throws rocks in the dark." His voice was steady, certain. "Vance is testing us, trying to frighten you into running. It's working." "No." He crouched before her, and his eyes met hers with an intensity that made the air vanish from her lungs. "It isn't. Because you're not the same woman who climbed out a window in terror. You made a choice today, Miss Cresswell. You chose to fight. And I will be damned if I let anyone make you regret that choice." She stared at him, this man she'd known for years and never truly seen. The feared Duke of Blackmore, kneeling before her like a supplicant, his face fierce with protectiveness she didn't understand. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. His jaw worked, and she saw him struggling with something, some truth he wasn't ready to share. "Because you deserved better than what life gave you," he said finally. "Because you deserved someone who would fight for you, not against you. Because some things are worth protecting, even when the cost is high." "And I'm worth protecting?" "Yes." The word was simple. "Absolute." "You are." Peregrine cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should focus on the immediate threat." Blackmore rose, his expression hardening back into the mask. "I've sent men to search the grounds. They won't find anyone. Vance is too clever to do his own dirty work." "Then what do? We proceed as planned. Tomorrow, we announce the engagement publicly. We show Vance that his intimidation tactics have failed." When Bryony finally retired to her room, she found a note slipped under her door. "The guest room locks from the inside. Use it tonight. I've posted guards outside your window and at both ends of the hallway. No one will harm you while you're under my roof." She read it 3 times, something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Then she locked the door, climbed into bed, and dreamed of gray eyes and gentle hands, and a voice that promised she was worth protecting. The announcement went out at dawn. By noon, the first visitors began arriving. Not at Thornhaven, but at Bryony's family estate, where Peregrine had returned to manage the chaos. Letters poured in. Cards were left. The curious and the scandalized descended like vultures. Bryony stayed at the lodge, watching from the window as the world outside erupted into gossip. "You should eat something." Mrs. Holt appeared at her elbow with a tray. "His Grace says you've barely touched your meals." "His Grace monitors my eating habits?" "His Grace monitors everything that happens in this house." The housekeeper's voice was dry but not unkind. "He's been pacing his study since 4 in the morning. I've never seen him so agitated." "How long have you worked for him?" she asked. 15 years, since before his first marriage." "And the late Duchess. What was she like?" Mrs. Holt was silent for a long moment. Then, carefully, "She was lovely. Kind. But fragile, in a way that wasn't always visible. The Duke loved her desperately, and when it happened..." The housekeeper shook her head. "I've never seen a man so destroyed. He blamed himself, even though there was nothing he could have done. He told me she was ill, in her mind." "Did he?" Mrs. Holt's eyebrows rose. "He doesn't speak of her, not to anyone. The fact that he told you..." She trailed off, something speculative in her gaze. Before Bryony could respond, the sound of hooves echoed from the drive. She moved to the window, her heart lurching. But it wasn't Vance's golden hair she saw. It was a woman, dark-haired, elegantly dressed, with the kind of beauty that demanded attention. She swept toward the lodge like she owned it. "Who is that?" Bryony asked. Mrs. Holt's face had gone carefully blank. Lady Isolde Ashworth, Lord Vance's sister. Bryony's blood went cold. She found Blackmore in the entrance hall, already facing down the newcomer. Lady Isolde stood just inside the door, her smile brittle as winter ice. "Dacian," her voice was silk over steel. "How lovely to see you again. It's been too long." "Not long enough." Blackmore's tone was flat. "What do you want, Isolde?" "I want to meet my brother's former fiancée, of course." Her gaze slid to Bryony. "So, this is the woman who's caused such a fuss. I expected someone more remarkable." "Lady Ashworth." Bryony descended the stairs, forcing her voice steady. "I wasn't aware Lord Vance had a sister." "Half-sister, technically. Different mothers. Same ruthless ambition." Isolde's smile sharpened. "Hadrian sent me to deliver a message, since his own attempts have been so rudely rebuffed. If his communication involves rocks through windows and threats of burning, I'm not interested." Something crossed Isolde's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. "You have more spine than I expected. That will make this more interesting." "Make what more interesting?" "The war, darling." Isolde moved further into the hall. "Surely you don't think Hadrian will simply accept this engagement? You were promised to him. Your father signed documents. There are legal implications." "Documents signed under duress," Blackmore cut in, "by a dying man who didn't understand what he was agreeing to. Duress is such an ugly word. Hadrian prefers to call it persuasion." Isolde turned to face him. "You know you can't win this, Dacian. My brother has connections you can't match. He has evidence of your wife's instability. He'll use it to paint you as unfit, dangerous. Let him try. He will. And when he does, Miss Cresswell will be caught in the crossfire." Isolde looked at Bryony with something that might have been pity. "You think you're trading one monster for another? But Hadrian, at least, is a monster you understand. Dacian Ravenswood is something far worse. And what is that? A man who destroys everything he loves." Isolde's voice was barely above a whisper. "He couldn't save Eleanor. He won't be able to save you either." "Get out!" Blackmore's voice was ice and murder. "Now!" "I'm leaving. I've delivered my message." Isolde paused at the door, and for a moment, something almost like regret flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone. "Hadrian is willing to be generous, if you come to him willingly. His offer stands until midnight tonight. After that, there will be no mercy for either of you." The door closed behind her. Bryony looked at Blackmore. His face was carved from stone, but his hands were trembling slightly. "She's lying," she said. "About you, about what happened to your wife." "Is she?" His laugh was bitter. "Eleanor is dead, because I couldn't see how deep her despair had become, because I was too focused on duty and reputation. That's not your fault, isn't it?" He turned to face her, and his eyes were raw with old grief. "I was her husband. I was supposed to protect her. Instead, I let her fade away in front of me, too blind to see what was happening until it was too late." "You're not blind now." She moved toward him. "You saw me last night. You saw what Vance was. You didn't look away. Looking isn't the same as saving. Then save me now." The words came out before she could stop them. "Not from Vance, from the fear that I've made a terrible mistake. Tell me that this engagement, this marriage, whatever it becomes, won't destroy us both." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm. "Careful. I can't promise that nothing will hurt you," he said softly. "But I can promise you this. I will stand between you and anyone who tries to harm you. I will use every weapon at my disposal to keep you safe, and I will never let you face your enemies alone." His voice dropped. "That is my vow, Bryony Cresswell. Whatever else happens between us, that will never change." She should pull away, should remember that this was a business arrangement. Instead, she found herself leaning into him, her forehead coming to rest against his chest. "I believe you," she whispered. His arms came around her, hesitant at first, then tightening. And they stood there in the entrance hall, two broken people holding each other together, while outside the storm continued to rage. Midnight came and went. Vance's deadline passed, and in the morning, everything would change. But for now, for this one quiet moment, Bryony let herself feel safe. She didn't notice the shadow that passed across the window, didn't see the figure that lingered at the edge of the trees, watching the lodge with hungry, calculating eyes. Vance had said there would be no mercy. He intended to keep that promise. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. The storm broke, but the roads remained treacherous, buying them time before they had to face society in person. Letters arrived in floods, some congratulatory, most curious, a few openly hostile. Bryony read them all, cataloging the allies and enemies. Through it all, Blackmore remained a constant presence, distant but watchful. He took his meals with her and Peregrine, discussed strategy in his study, and ensured she had everything she needed. But he never touched her again, not since that moment in the entrance hall when he'd held her like she mattered. She found herself missing it, missing him, which was absurd because she barely knew him, except that wasn't quite true anymore. She knew he rose before dawn and walked the grounds alone, regardless of weather. She knew he took his coffee black and his whiskey neat. She knew he flinched when servants approached too quickly, a remnant of some old wound. She knew he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, his gray eyes filled with something that made her chest ache. On the 4th morning, she found him in the library, surrounded by papers and ledgers, his hair disheveled and his cravat abandoned entirely. "You haven't slept," she said from the doorway. He looked up, and she saw the exhaustion carved into his features. "Neither of you." "I tried. The dreams." She stopped, unwilling to admit that every time she closed her eyes, she saw Vance's face, felt his hands on her arms. Blackmore's expression softened. "Come here." She shouldn't. It was improper. But her feet carried her forward anyway, until she stood beside his chair. "What are you working on?" "Your father's debts." He gestured at the papers. "Vance holds most of them, but not all. I've been acquiring the others, buying up your family's obligations piece by piece." "Why?" "Because debt is leverage. As long as Vance can threaten your brother's estate, he has power over you. I'm taking that power away." She stared at the ledgers. "This must be costing you a fortune." "I have a fortune. I might as well use it for something worthwhile." "I don't want to be your obligation," she said softly. "You're not." "Then what am I?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he set down his pen and turned to face her fully, and his eyes held something she'd never seen before, something raw and unguarded. "You're the first person in 5 years who's looked at me like I might still be human," he said. "You're the woman who climbed out a window in a snowstorm rather than surrender to a monster. He stopped, jaw working. "You're becoming something I didn't expect." "What didn't you expect?" "Someone I care about." The words seemed torn from him. "Someone whose pain keeps me awake at night. Someone I think about when I should be focusing on strategy, and instead I'm wondering if she's warm enough, if she's eating enough, if the nightmares are keeping her from rest." Bryony's lungs seized. Dacian! It was the first time she'd used his given name. Something passed through his expression, Hope or fear or both. Don't. His voice was rough. Don't say my name like that unless you mean it. Like what? Like you might actually want me. Like this arrangement might become something real. He rose from his chair, putting distance between them. I told you this would be a marriage of convenience. I promised you freedom, independence. I won't go back on that promise simply because I've developed feelings. Feelings? She followed him, refusing to let him retreat. What kind of feelings? The inconvenient kind. He laughed bitterly. The kind that make a man forget his principles and everything he swore he wouldn't do again. Again? I loved Eleanor. The words came out harsh, painful. I loved her with everything I had, and it wasn't enough. I couldn't save her. He turned to face her. I swore I would never care for anyone that way again. I swore I would keep my heart locked away where it couldn't be broken. And now? And now you're standing in my library at 4 a.m, wearing my mother's dress, looking at me like I'm not a monster. And his voice cracked. I don't know how to protect myself from you. She should step back, should give him space. Instead, she moved closer. What if I don't want you to protect yourself from me? He went very still. Bryony. What if I want this to be real? She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw. What if I'm tired of pretending that sharing a roof with you hasn't changed something? You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She held his gaze. I spent years being invisible, being overlooked, and told that my worth was measured in dowries and connections. And then you found me in the snow, half dead and terrified. And you looked at me like I mattered. You are worth saving. Then stop pushing me away. Her voice broke. Stop being so afraid of caring that you won't let yourself be cared for. His control shattered. One moment they were standing apart. The next, his hands were in her hair, and his mouth was on hers, and she was drowning in him, in the taste of whiskey and desperation, and 5 years of loneliness finally finding an end. He kissed her, like a man who'd forgotten how to want anything, and was learning all over again. His lips were demanding, but gentle, fierce, but careful, and when she gasped against his mouth, he swallowed the sound like it was precious. We shouldn't, he breathed against her lips. This isn't. I don't care what we shouldn't do. She pulled him closer. I care about what I want. And I want this. I want you. He made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a surrender, and kissed her again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. This changes everything, he murmured. I know. I can't go back to pretending I don't feel this. Then don't. She traced the line of his jaw. Don't pretend. Don't hide. Just be with me. He pulled back to look at her. You deserve better than a broken man with a ruined reputation. Maybe I want the broken man. She smiled, tremulous. Maybe I'm a little broken myself. Bryony. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. If we do this, if we make this real, there's no going back. Vance will use it against us. My past will become your burden. I've already chosen to carry that burden. I chose it the moment I said I'd marry you. She took his hand, pressing it to her heart. The only question is whether you'll choose to carry mine. He was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, I already have. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise instead of a surrender. The days that followed existed outside of time. They were careful during daylight hours, maintaining propriety when servants were present. But in the stolen moments, the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, they found each other again and again. Bryony learned the map of him, the scar on his shoulder from a duel in his youth, the way his breath hitched when she touched the back of his neck, the sound he made, low and broken, when she said his name in the darkness. He learned her just as thoroughly. The spot behind her ear that made her shiver, the way she laughed when she was truly happy, a sound she'd almost forgotten she could make, the tears she tried to hide when the nightmares came, and the way she finally let him hold her through them. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps of 6 years of acquaintance. He told her about his childhood, cold and lonely, raised by servants, while his parents pursued their separate ambitions. She told him about her mother's death when she was 12, the way her father had slowly crumbled under grief and debt. He told her about Eleanor, really told her, the beautiful, brilliant woman who had slowly lost herself to a darkness no one could see. The nights he'd held her while she wept, for reasons she couldn't explain. The morning he'd found her room empty, the window open. "I should have known," he said, his voice hollow. "I should have seen the signs." "You couldn't have known." She pressed closer to him. "The mind's illnesses are invisible. That's what makes them so cruel. I've spent 5 years punishing myself, 5 years believing I didn't deserve happiness. And now?" He turned to look at her, and in the firelight, his eyes were soft. "Now I'm starting to wonder if maybe I was wrong." On the 7th night, everything changed. The household had retired early. Peregrine had finally returned to their family estate, satisfied that Bryony was safe. They were alone for the first time, truly alone. Bryony found him in the study, staring at the fire. "You're brooding," she said. "I'm contemplating." "Same thing." She moved to stand beside him. "What are you contemplating?" "Tomorrow we return to society. The engagement will be formally announced at the Harrington Ball. Everyone will see us together, judge us, and whisper about us." He set down his glass. "After tomorrow, there's no going back." "Do you want to go back?" "No." The word was immediate, certain. "But I need to know that you don't either." "I don't feel trapped." She turned to face him. "I feel free. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've made a choice that's truly mine. Even knowing what people will say? Even knowing all of that?" She rose on her toes, pressing a kiss to the corner of his mouth. "I choose you, Dacian. Whatever comes next, I choose you." Something broke in him then. She could see it happen, the last wall crumbling. He kissed her with an intensity that stole her breath. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she went willingly, her fingers working at the buttons of his waistcoat. Bryony. Her name was a warning and a plea. "If we do this." "I know. We're not married yet. We will be soon." She pushed the waistcoat from his shoulders. "And I don't want to wait another moment." "Are you sure?" "Dacian." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her gaze. "I have never wanted anything in my life as much as I want you right now." His control snapped. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the settee by the fire. Clothes disappeared, barriers fell, and when they finally came together, skin against skin, heart against heart, Bryony felt something click into place inside her. This was where she belonged. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the fire casting dancing shadows across their bodies. "I love you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, fragile and enormous. You don't have to say it back. I know this has all happened fast. "I love you too." He went still beneath her. "Bryony, I love you." She lifted her head to look at him, smiling. "I love your stubbornness and your brooding. I love that you saved me, and then gave me the choice to save myself. I love that you're afraid of being loved, but you let me love you anyway. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Her smile widened. "But you're stuck with me now." He laughed, the sound startled and genuine, and pulled her down for another kiss. They didn't sleep that night. They talked and touched until dawn crept through the curtains. And when they finally rose to face the day, to dress and prepare for the battle ahead, they did it together. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. The Harrington ball was everything Bryony had feared, and more. The moment they entered the ballroom, every head turned. Whispers erupted like wildfire. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, judging her dress, her posture, her worthiness to stand beside the most notorious man in 3 counties. Dacian's hand tightened on hers. "Breathe," he murmured. "They're just people. People who think I'm either a fortune hunter or a fool. Let them think what they want. We know the truth." The first hour passed in a blur of introductions, most of them insincere. Bryony smiled until her face ached, deflected pointed questions about the suddenness of their engagement. Dacian stayed close, a protective presence at her side, but she could see the tension coiling in his shoulders. This world had wounded him deeply. "You should circulate," she said during a quiet moment. "Lady Whitford has been trying to catch your attention. I suspect she has information we need." He hesitated. "I don't want to leave you." "I'll be fine. I'll stay by the refreshment table." She watched him go, watched the crowd part before him. "Miss Creswell." The voice came from behind her, smooth and poisonous. "Or should I say, the future Duchess of Blackmore." She turned slowly. Lord Hadrian Vance stood before her, resplendent in evening clothes, his golden hair gleaming. He looked every inch the gentleman. Only his eyes betrayed the monster beneath. "Lord Vance, I wasn't aware you'd be attending. I wasn't going to miss the spectacle." He moved closer. "The woman who fled my house in terror, now parading on the arm of a murderer. Quite the story. The Duke of Blackmore is not a murderer, isn't he? I have witnesses who say otherwise. People who were at Blackmore Castle when Eleanor died, who heard her screaming, who saw bruises on her arms." His smile sharpened. "What do you think society will believe when those witnesses come forward?" Her blood ran cold. "You're lying." "Am I? Perhaps you should ask your beloved Duke about the night Eleanor died. Ask him what really happened. Ask him why there was blood on his hands when the servants found him." "You're trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to save you." He reached for her hand, and she jerked away. "Come with me now, tonight, and I'll forget everything. We'll announce our own engagement. All you have to do is choose me." "I already made my choice." "You made a mistake." His voice hardened. "If you go through with this marriage, I will destroy him. I will destroy everything he has, everyone he cares about. And I will make sure you watch it happen." "What is wrong with you?" The words burst out. "Why can't you accept that I don't want you?" Something ugly twisted his features. "Because you're mine. You've been mine since your father signed those documents." "The lady asked you a question, Vance." Dacian's voice cut through the air like a blade. He materialized beside her. "What is wrong with you?" Vance didn't flinch. "Blackmore, I was just congratulating your fiancé." "Is that what you call threatening her?" "I was simply reminding her of her options." Vance's smile was a knife. "She has a choice. She doesn't have to marry a man with your history." "And what history is that?" "The kind that ends with women dead at the bottom of towers." "I have witnesses, Blackmore. People who know what really happened to Eleanor." Dacian went very still. Too still. "Dacian," she touched his arm. "Don't. Listen to your fiancé." Vance's voice was mocking. "We wouldn't want a scene." They stood frozen, the air between them crackling. "Dacian!" Bryony's voice was firm. "Walk away. He wants you to react." For a long, terrible moment, she thought he wouldn't listen. Then slowly, he stepped back. This isn't over, he said, his voice low. No. Vance's smile widened. It isn't. He melted back into the crowd. We should leave, Bryony said. Now. Before what? Before I prove him right? Dacian's voice was bitter. He's already won. By tomorrow, everyone will be talking about how the Duke of Blackmore nearly attacked a Viscount. They'll forget. They never forget. He turned to face her. This is what being with me means. Constant attacks, constant suspicion. I don't care. You should. His voice cracked. I can't protect you from this. I can only give him more ammunition every time I react. She didn't have an answer. They left the ball shortly after, the carriage ride home silent. Dacian stared out the window. When they reached Thornhaven, he helped her from the carriage with mechanical courtesy, then disappeared into his study without a word. She stood in the entrance hall, alone, and wondered if Vance had already won. 3 days of silence. Dacian took his meals in his study. He emerged only for brief moments, to issue instructions to servants. When Bryony tried to speak with him, he answered in monosyllables. She should be angry. She was angry. But beneath the anger was something worse. Fear that he was slipping away from her, retreating into the shell he'd built after Eleanor's death. On the 4th morning, she'd had enough. She didn't knock on the study door, she simply opened it. We need to talk. I'm busy. I don't care. She closed the door behind her. You've been avoiding me for 3 days. There's nothing to discuss. There's everything to discuss. She moved toward the desk. Vance is trying to destroy you, and instead of fighting back, you're helping him. You're destroying yourself from the inside. What would you have me do? Finally, he looked up. He has witnesses, Bryony. People who will swear under oath that I hurt Eleanor. Against that, what do I have? You have the truth. Facts rarely triumph over perception. He rose from his chair, pacing. I've spent 5 years trying to prove my innocence. None of it matters, because people believe what they want to believe. Then we find different evidence. We expose Vance for what he really is. And how do you propose we do that? He's careful. He's been planning this for years. Even if there is a way, the cost. He stopped, his back to her. The cost of pursuing this could destroy you. He'll drag your name through the mud. I don't care what he says about me. But I do, he spun to face her. I care that loving me will ruin you. I care that I'm not worth the price you'll have to pay. That's not your decision to make. Isn't it? I've already destroyed one woman I loved. I can't destroy another. You didn't destroy Eleanor, didn't I? His voice was raw with anguish. I married her, knowing she was fragile. When she started to crumble, I didn't see it. I was too focused on duty. His voice broke. I can't do that to you. Then don't watch me suffer. Fight beside me instead. She closed the distance between them, taking his face in her hands. I'm not Eleanor, she said softly. I'm not fragile. I survived Vance. I survived a snowstorm. I will survive whatever comes next, because I'm not doing it alone anymore. Bryony, you promised me. Her voice strengthened. You promised you would stand between me and anyone who tried to harm me. Did you mean it? He closed his eyes. Yes. Then let me make the same promise to you. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against his chest, and he was shaking, trembling with emotions too long contained. I'm sorry, he breathed into her hair. I thought if I pushed you away, if I ended this before Vance could use it against us. You thought you were protecting me. I was being a coward. He pulled back to look at her. I was so afraid of losing you that I almost threw you away. Almost. She smiled, tremulous. But you didn't. I'm still here. You're still here. He kissed her, desperate and tender. God help me. You're still here. The study door burst open. Peregrine stood in the doorway, his face pale, a letter clutched in his hand. "You need to see this. Both of you. Now." Dacian took the letter, scanning its contents. His expression went from confused to horrified. "What is it?" Bryony demanded. He looked up, his face the color of ash. "Vance has filed a petition with the magistrate. He's claiming I abducted you from his house by force, that I've been holding you prisoner at Thornhaven." His voice was hollow. "He's demanding your immediate return and my arrest on charges of kidnapping." The ground shifted beneath her feet. "He can't do that. It's not true. What matters is that he has witnesses, documents, a story that fits what everyone already believes." Dacian's laugh was bitter. "The dangerous Duke of Blackmore stealing women in the night. Then we fight it. We go to the magistrate ourselves." "And your word against his?" Peregrine's voice was grim. "The magistrate is his cousin." A commotion at the front of the house, voices raised, the sound of boots on marble. They looked at each other. Vance hadn't waited for the courts. He'd come to take her himself. The entrance hall was full of men, a dozen at least, wearing the uniforms of the local militia, led by a nervous-looking officer who flinched when Dacian descended the stairs. Behind them stood Lord Hadrian Vance. "Your Grace." The officer's voice cracked. "I have a warrant for your arrest, and for the recovery of Miss Bryony Cresswell. Against her will." Dacian's voice was ice. "Does Miss Cresswell look like she's being held against her will?" The officer glanced at Bryony. "I don't care what the warrant says." She descended the stairs. "I'm not being held prisoner. I'm here because I choose to be. I'm engaged to the Duke of Blackmore, and I will marry him regardless of whatever lies Lord Vance has told you." The lady is clearly suffering from some form of coercion. Vance's voice was smooth, concerned. Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps. "I am not a victim. Come with me, Bryony. I'll take you somewhere safe." "Touch me," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "and I will scream so loudly that every person in this county will hear. I will tell them exactly what you threatened to do to me the night I fled your house." She held up her forearm, pushing back her sleeve to reveal the fading bruises. "These say otherwise." The officer's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping in. "Miss Cresswell, are you saying that Lord Vance assaulted you?" "I'm saying that I fled his house in terror because he told me exactly what he planned to do to me. I'm saying that I nearly died in a snowstorm because I would rather freeze than become his wife. I'm saying that the Duke of Blackmore saved my life and offered me protection when no one else would." She lifted her chin. "And I'm saying that if you try to take me from this house, you will have to drag me out screaming." Vance's mask had cracked, revealing fury beneath. "The warrant is valid," he snapped. "Regardless of what she claims, she is to be returned to my custody." "Your custody." Dacian stepped forward. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that her father promised her to me. On the grounds that she is, legally speaking, my property." "She is not property." Dacian's voice was deadly quiet. "She is a woman, and she has made her choice. Her choice is irrelevant. Then so is this warrant." "What would be unfortunate," said a new voice from the doorway, "is if Lord Vance were to be arrested for fraud, assault, and attempted extortion." Everyone turned. A woman stood in the entrance, flanked by two men in official uniforms. Lady Isolde Ashworth. "What are you doing here?" Vance's voice had gone uncertain. "Saving myself from being dragged down with you, brother dear." Lady Isolde moved into the hall. "Did you really think I would keep your secrets forever?" "Isolde." "I have here," she continued, producing a sheaf of papers. "Documents proving that Lord Hadrian Vance forged the signatures on the debt agreements. I have sworn statements from the servants who witnessed his assault on Miss Cresswell, and I have testimony regarding the witnesses he paid to lie about what happened at Blackmore Castle. She looked at Dacian with something complicated in her eyes. I've been gathering this evidence for months, waiting for the courage to use it. The hall erupted. Vance lunged for the papers, but the men flanking Lady Isolde restrained him. You can't do this. Vance's voice had risen to a snarl. I'm your brother. You're a monster. Isolde's voice was flat. I've enabled you for too long. Looked the other way while you destroyed people. But when you threatened to use lies against an innocent man, when you tried to claim a woman who would rather die than be yours. She shook her head. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Lord Hadrian Vance, you are under arrest for fraud, assault, and conspiracy to pervert justice. You will be taken to London to await trial. Vance's face contorted with rage. This isn't over. You will be silent, the officer said firmly, or we will silence you. They led him away, still struggling. Bryony stood frozen. Why? She turned to Lady Isolde. Why did you help us? Isolde was silent for a moment. Because I knew Eleanor. She was kind to me when no one else was. She looked at Dacian. I knew you didn't hurt her. I always knew. But I was too afraid of Hadrian to speak. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you find happiness. Both of you. She was gone before either could respond. Bryony turned to Dacian. He stood motionless, his face blank with shock. It's over, she said softly. Dacian, it's over. He looked at her. 5 years, he repeated. 5 years of rumors, of believing I would never be free. And it's over. Yes. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I love you, he breathed. God, Bryony, I love you so much. I know. She held him tighter. I love you too. Marry me. He pulled back, cupping her face. Tomorrow. Tonight. As soon as possible. We're already engaged. I want to be married. I want to stand before God and everyone and promise to love you for the rest of my life. Then yes. She was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes. He kissed her, deep and thorough. But before they could lose themselves completely, Bryony pulled back. Wait, she said. You never answered my question. What question? When did you know? She searched his face. When did you first know that you felt something for me? He was silent for a moment. Then, softly, do you remember the summer your mother died? Peregrine brought me home from Cambridge to stay with your family. She frowned, thinking back. That was 11 years ago. I was 12. You were grieving. Everyone was. But you were the only one who tried to comfort your father, your brother, everyone else, when you were the one who needed comfort most. His voice roughened. I watched you bring tea to your father at midnight. I watched you sit with Peregrine when he couldn't sleep, and I thought, she's the strongest person I've ever met. You were 18. I was a child. I know. I didn't let myself think about it then. But I remembered. And years later, when you grew up, when I saw you at balls and dinners, I remembered that girl who held her family together when everything was falling apart. He cupped her face with both hands. I've been watching you for 11 years, Bryony. I've loved you for longer than I knew how to name it. Tears streamed down her face. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I didn't deserve you. Because I was married. And then I was grieving. And then I was the man everyone believed was a monster. He pressed his forehead to hers. But now I'm free. And if you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I was right about you all along. You are the strongest person I've ever known. She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it. They were free. They were together, and they were going to spend the rest of their lives proving that some loves were worth fighting for. The wedding was small, intimate, exactly what they wanted. They held it at Thornhaven, in the same library where they'd first confessed their feelings. The guest list was limited to family and close friends, people who had stood by them through the scandal. Peregrine gave her away, his eyes suspiciously bright. "If you hurt her," he murmured, "I will end you." "I know." Dacian's voice was steady. "I would expect nothing less." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They spoke their vows by firelight. And when the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, when Dacian kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache, Bryony felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Finally, after everything, peace. The months that followed were not easy. Vance's trial dominated the newspapers, and though he was ultimately convicted, his supporters ensured that the scandal touched everyone involved. But other doors opened. People who had shunned Dacian for years reached out with apologies, with invitations. The truth about Eleanor's death spread through society, and many accepted the reality that Dacian Ravenswood had been a grieving husband, not a murderer. Lady Isolde Ashworth retired to the continent. She wrote to Bryony occasionally, brief letters that spoke of art and travel. Spring came to Thornhaven, melting the snow that had nearly claimed Bryony's life. She spent her mornings in the garden, her afternoons with her husband, her evenings planning the future they would build together. And in the quiet moments, when she woke before dawn to find Dacian still sleeping beside her, she allowed herself to marvel at how far they'd come. "You're staring?" His voice was rough with sleep. "I'm admiring." She traced the line of his jaw. "My husband. It still sounds strange. Good strange. Wonderful strange." She kissed him softly. "Impossible strange. Nothing about us is impossible. We've already proven that." He pulled her closer. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "The night you found me?" "Every day." His arms tightened around her. "Every day, I thank God that I decided to take the long way home. 5 minutes later, and I would have been dead." "I know." His voice was rough. "And it terrifies me, the thought of never having had this. But you did find me." "I did." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." 2 years later, the Duchess of Blackmore stood at the window of Blackmore Castle, watching her husband chase their daughter across the snow-covered lawn. Rosemary was 2 now, a wild-haired terror with her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She shrieked with laughter as Dacian caught her. "He's besotted." Peregrine appeared at Bryony's elbow. "I've never seen a man so thoroughly undone by a child. He's making up for lost time." Bryony smiled, one hand resting on the swell of her stomach, where a second child grew. "He spent so many years believing he didn't deserve happiness. And you? Are you happy?" She turned to look at him. "More than I ever imagined possible." Outside, Dacian had spotted her in the window. He raised one hand in greeting, Rosemary mimicking the gesture. Later that evening, after Rosemary had been put to bed and Peregrine had retired, Bryony and Dacian sat together before the fire. "Do you remember," she said, "the first night at the lodge? When you told me I was under your protection?" "I remember." He pulled her closer. "I remember thinking that you were the bravest, most stubborn woman I'd ever met. And now? Now, I know I was right." He kissed her forehead. "You're my choice, my partner, and my love. The person I want beside me in every storm, for the rest of my life." She traced the scar along his jaw. "Do you remember what you said to me that night? After you threatened Vance? That you could sleep in the stables if you preferred." She swatted his arm. "After that." I remember. His expression softened. I told you that you were under my protection, that Vance would learn what that meant. And now? Now I understand that protection goes both ways. He met her eyes. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Maybe more. We saved each other. She pressed a kiss to his jaw. That's what love is, I think. Saving each other, over and over again, in all the ways that matter. He was silent for a moment, the firelight playing across his features. I never believed I would have this, he said finally. A wife I adore. Children who light up my life. A future that doesn't feel like a prison sentence. He turned to look at her. You gave me all of that. You gave me everything. You gave me the same. She kissed him softly. A home, a purpose. Someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves what he sees. I do. He deepened the kiss, pulling her into his lap. God, Bryony, I do. I love every stubborn, brilliant inch of you. Show me, she whispered. He did. And later, as they lay tangled together in the firelight, sated and peaceful, Bryony thought about the night that had started it all. The cold that had nearly killed her. The snow that had blinded her. The fear that had driven her into the wilderness. She'd been so certain she was going to die. Instead, she'd found everything she never knew she needed. What are you thinking? Dacian murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. I'm thinking about storms, she said. How the worst ones sometimes lead to the best outcomes. Is that what I am? A good outcome? You're the best outcome. She propped herself up to look at him. You're my home, Dacian. My shelter. My heart. And you're mine. He pulled her down for another kiss. Always and forever. You're mine. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and gentle, covering the world in white. But inside Blackmore Castle, wrapped in her husband's arms, Bryony Ravenswood had never felt warmer. Some storms were worth weathering. Some loves were worth fighting for. And some endings, the true ones, the hard-won ones, the ones that required courage and sacrifice, and choosing each other every day, those were the ones that lasted forever. Thank you for staying with Bryony and Dacian until the very end. Their story began with a night that nearly destroyed her, but in the darkness she found something unexpected. A man who would fight for her, protect her, and love her without condition. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because there are more stories waiting. More impossible loves. More hard-won choices. More moments that remind us why we believe in happily ever after. Until next time.